What if the thing keeping you trapped with a narcissistic person isn't their behavior, but your constant attempt to make them finally understand? What if the moment you stop explaining, stop proving, and stop chasing answers is the moment their power over you begins to disappear? Today, we're going to talk about the one shift that changes the entire dynamic. Not revenge, not manipulation, not trying to win. A shift that brings your attention back where it belongs, to yourself. If this message is speaking to something you've experienced, take a moment and share in the comments. What boundary are you learning to set? Sometimes naming the pattern is the first step toward changing it. Narcissistic dynamics often survive because of a powerful emotional cycle. One person provokes, criticizes, withdraws, or creates confusion, and the other person reacts by trying harder to explain, defend, fix, or prove themselves. The reaction becomes the fuel that keeps the cycle going. This does not mean that your feelings are wrong or that you should ignore harmful behavior. It means understanding that constant emotional engagement can sometimes give the other person more influence over your peace and attention. When someone repeatedly tries to pull you into arguments, accusations, or emotional chaos, the natural response may be to fight for your truth. You may think, if I can just explain it clearly enough, they will finally understand. But in many unhealthy relationship patterns, the issue is not a lack of information. The other person may already know how their words or actions affect you, yet they continue the behavior because the conflict itself creates a sense of control, attention, or emotional access. Breaking this pattern begins with recognizing your own responses. Instead of immediately reacting to every message, criticism, or attempt to provoke you, you create space between what happens and how you respond. This space gives you the ability to choose your actions instead of being pulled into automatic emotional reactions. Emotional detachment does not mean becoming heartless or pretending you do not care. It means refusing to let another person's behavior dictate your mood, decisions, or sense of worth. It means understanding that you do not have to attend every argument you are invited into. The shift is from trying to change their reaction to protecting your own emotional stability. When you stop giving endless explanations, stop chasing closure, and stop seeking validation from someone who consistently withholds it, you begin to regain control over your own life. The goal is not to win against the narcissist. The goal is to stop losing yourself in the struggle. Emotional detachment is one of the most powerful shifts a person can make when dealing with narcissistic dynamics because it changes where your power comes from. Many people believe the solution is getting the narcissistic person to understand their pain, acknowledge their mistakes, or finally provide the care and validation they have been seeking. But when your emotional stability depends on another person changing, you place your peace in someone else's hands. Emotional detachment does not mean that you stop caring, become cruel, or ignore your emotions. It means you stop allowing another person's moods, reactions, approval, or rejection to control your inner world. It is the process of creating emotional distance between what someone does and how deeply it affects your sense of self. In unhealthy relationships, a narcissistic person may create a pattern where you constantly monitor their behavior. You may find yourself wondering, are they upset with me? How can I make them happy? What can I say so they don't react badly? Over time, your attention becomes focused on managing them instead of caring for yourself. Emotional detachment allows you to step out of that role. Instead of immediately reacting to criticism, blame, or emotional pressure, you begin to observe the situation with clarity. You recognize that their words are information about their behavior, not a definition of your value. This shift can feel uncomfortable because many people have been conditioned to believe that love means endless understanding, endless patience, and endless chances. But healthy connection requires mutual respect, accountability, and emotional safety. When you detach emotionally, you stop chasing moments of kindness from someone who repeatedly hurts you. You stop measuring your worth by their attention. You stop trying to earn basic respect. The most important change is internal. You begin choosing yourself without needing permission from the other person. Their behavior may not change immediately, but your relationship with their behavior changes, and that is where your freedom begins, because they no longer have the same power to disturb your emotional balance. Blocking can sometimes be an important boundary, especially when someone's behavior is abusive, threatening, or causing significant emotional harm. But blocking alone is not always the deepest solution because the real struggle is often not just access to the person, it is the emotional hold they still have over you. Many people believe that if they block a narcissistic person, they will instantly feel free, but then they may find themselves checking for messages, wondering what the other person is doing, replaying old conversations, or hoping the person will somehow realize what they lost. The physical distance exists, but the emotional attachment to the conflict remains. The reason blocking is complicated is because narcissistic dynamics are often built around emotional reactions. The cycle may include periods of affection, conflict, silence, apologies, promises, or attempts to reconnect. When you are caught in this cycle, the question becomes less about whether they can contact you and more about whether their actions still control your thoughts and emotions. Sometimes blocking becomes another form of communication. A person may block someone hoping they will chase them, apologize, or finally understand their pain. But when the goal of blocking is to get a reaction from the other person, your attention is still centered on them. A stronger approach is to ask yourself, what choice protects my peace and supports my healing? For some people, that may mean blocking completely. For others, especially when contact is unavoidable because of family, work, or shared responsibilities, it may mean creating emotional boundaries and limiting unnecessary interaction. The most powerful boundary is not simply removing someone from your phone. It is removing their ability to control your emotional state. When you stop waiting for their reaction, stop looking for their approval, and stop measuring your worth by whether they come back, you reclaim your power. The goal is not to prove that you can live without them. The goal is to build a life where your happiness is no longer dependent on their presence, absence, attention, or rejection. Repeatedly begging for empathy, accountability, or understanding from a narcissistic person can create a painful cycle where your emotional needs become dependent on someone who may not be willing or able to meet them. Many people stay trapped in this cycle because they believe that if they find the perfect words, explain their feelings more clearly, or show enough love, the other person will finally recognize the hurt they have caused. The problem is that emotional connection cannot be built through one person constantly chasing and the other person constantly withholding. Healthy relationships require two people who are willing to listen, reflect, and take responsibility. When accountability is missing, begging often turns into a painful search for a response that may never come. Begging can also unintentionally create a power imbalance. Every time you plead for someone to care, apologize, or choose you, you may be placing their approval above your own emotional needs. Your mind becomes focused on getting a reaction from them instead of asking whether their behavior aligns with the respect and care you deserve. This does not mean your desire for love, closure, or understanding is wrong. Wanting to be heard is a deeply human need. The challenge comes when you continue seeking that validation from someone who repeatedly shows that they are unwilling to provide it. A powerful shift happens when you stop asking, "How do I make them understand my pain?" and start asking, "What does their behavior reveal about the relationship I am experiencing?" You begin to recognize that closure does not always come from the other person admitting they were wrong. Sometimes closure comes from accepting what their patterns have already shown you. The moment you stop begging is the moment you begin reclaiming your dignity. You no longer chase someone for basic kindness. You no longer negotiate for respect. You begin standing firmly in the belief that your needs matter. The goal is not to make the narcissistic person regret losing you. The goal is to stop abandoning yourself while waiting for someone else to value you. Your power returns when you realize that love should never require you to beg for the bare minimum. A major turning point in healing from narcissistic dynamics happens when you shift your attention from trying to understand why the other person behaves the way they do to understanding what you need to feel safe, respected, and emotionally healthy. Many people become trapped in endless analysis, asking questions like, "Why did they hurt me? Why can't they see what they are doing?" Or, "Why did they treat me this way when I have given them so much?" These questions are understandable, but they can keep you emotionally connected to the very person who is causing confusion and pain. When your mind is constantly focused on explaining their behavior, you may unintentionally neglect your own feelings, needs, and boundaries. Understanding someone's behavior can be useful, but it becomes harmful when it replaces self-care. You do not need to fully decode every manipulation, every contradiction, or every change in their mood before you are allowed to protect yourself. Sometimes the pattern itself is the information you need. The powerful shift is moving from curiosity about them to awareness of yourself. Instead of asking, "Why are they doing this?" you begin asking, "How does this relationship make me feel? Do I feel respected? Can I express my needs without fear? Am I becoming a smaller version of myself to keep the peace?" These questions return your focus to the one person you actually have control over, yourself. When you start prioritizing your needs, you begin rebuilding trust with yourself. You learn to recognize your emotional signals instead of dismissing them. You begin understanding that discomfort, exhaustion, and constant anxiety are not signs that you need to try harder. They may be signs that something in the dynamic needs to change. The goal is not to become obsessed with labeling another person. The goal is to become aware of your own experience. A narcissistic person may continue behaving the way they always have, but your relationship with that behavior can change. When you stop spending all your energy searching for answers about them and start investing that energy into yourself, you begin creating the foundation for freedom, confidence, and emotional peace. Silence and consistency are two of the strongest boundaries you can create when dealing with unhealthy relationship patterns. Many people believe a boundary is something you say that will make another person change their behavior, but a true boundary is not about controlling someone else. It is about deciding how you will respond and what you will allow into your life. With narcissistic dynamics, emotional conversations can often become exhausting because the focus shifts away from the original issue and turns into blame, denial, criticism, or confusion. You may enter the conversation hoping to be understood, but leave feeling more drained, unheard, and questioning yourself. This is where consistency becomes powerful. Instead of repeatedly explaining your feelings, defending your choices, or trying to convince someone to respect your needs, you begin responding in a calm and predictable way. You stop allowing every accusation or emotional trigger to pull you into a cycle. Silence, when used with intention, is not weakness. It is not avoidance. It can be a form of self-protection. It communicates that you are no longer willing to participate in conversations that are designed to create chaos rather than understanding. A consistent boundary might look like refusing to argue about the same issue repeatedly, ending conversations when disrespect begins, or limiting your emotional availability when someone continues to violate your limits. The power comes from following through, not just stating the boundary. Many people struggle with boundaries because they fear the other person's reaction. They worry that setting limits will cause conflict, anger, or rejection. But when you constantly abandon your own needs to avoid someone else's